I think I finally figured out the timing that it has to be in order to get the music to flop over at just the right moment, so that it'll change tracks right when we move into here. So I have one thing that I can be proud of myself for today, and I will count myself lucky that I have anything to be proud of myself for today. But there we go. That's what I can offer you, and that's what's going on. Hello, Zbaradan, and Kalen is back. Huzzah, it is. And Gilladgood is here as well. Glad to see the people here. Acolyte of Death, the Avatar RPG is live. It is not really. We have the Quickstart. The Quickstart is available for anybody who wants a chance to have a look at what the game is going to look like. It's available on DriveThruRPG. You can just straight up buy it for zero in whatever currency you choose. It's good to see too. It's totally fine that you've been away, Kalen. Everyone's got their own lives they got to deal with. I have my own lives to deal with as well. And Ifile, hello. Good to see you here. No, the Kickstarter for the Avatar Legends RPG is still ongoing. They've blown past all of their stretch goals, and at the moment, if I consult said Kickstarter by Magpie Games, they have currently funded this. Here, let me get it in American dollars because that's going to be easier for people to get. They're currently over $5 million pledged of a goal of 50,000. Now, the goals are never count. Okay, if you are not aware, when it comes to crowdfunding campaigns, you always want to set your goal incredibly low if you can at all afford to do so. Because if you fully fund in one day, it makes you look really good. And then your stretch goals come in, people try to encourage other people to come in for the stretch goals. It doesn't look good if your Kickstarter does not succeed. So goals are always set way lower than they should be. This is the way. And so I'm looking at a goal of $50,000, having raised over $5 million. Obviously, they were planning on going a little higher than that. But all of their stretch goals, as far as I can tell, have been unlocked. I don't think they have any more to offer because it's been... oh, maybe not. They've unlocked a White Lotus Pie Show tile. So they've still got some things, I think, that they've got in their thing. Yeah, Essence met the original goal in 19 minutes. And this is mostly because you want to make sure that you hit that goal. If you've run a crowdfunding campaign before, it is critical that you hit the goal as early as you possibly can, preferably in the first 24 hours, preferably in the first hour if you can. Because that's when people sit up and take notice. It's kind of a cheap trick, but it happens all the time. The disadvantage, of course, if you have a Kickstarter campaign that starts and you say you know that you need $500,000, but you put your goal at $50,000, if you hit the goal of $50,000, you are legally required to actually get stuff done. So you run the risk, if you put your goal too low, that you're going to be in for it. You're going to be on the hook, even if you don't have enough money to actually get it out there in time. So this is a tactic that's often used by companies that have run several Kickstarters in the past that know that they have the marketing budget to get things out there. I know that Avatar Legends has been pinged to me many times over several different ad delivery services, and I have to commend them, because unfortunately one of the realities is that you also have to be able to spend money to make money. You have to be able to spend money in order to get the marketing that you need in order to get people to come in and do that. The background is a bit loud. All right, I can sort that. Hopefully that's better for you. So yeah, that's life in Kickstarter lane. This is also why when people have asked us, for instance, about things like the crowdfund for season 3 of LARPs, it won't happen unless we know we can get the money that we need. And the way that we guess that is by knowing how many people are on our pre-registration list. And the pre-registration list is currently only at about a quarter of the names that we need in order to hopefully get the money that we need. So it's not looking great, but that's okay. LARPs is pretty old anyway. So technically we did an Indiegogo for season 2. We didn't do it on Kickstarter. I'm not sure why we chose Indiegogo over Kickstarter, because we actually had people dedicated specifically to the crowdfund, and they knew more about crowdfunding than I did. So they did that. And we did crowdfund for season 2. This was when we still had active support from Geek and Sundry, but they also kind of dropped their support. They talked about the crowdfund as it was happening as we were airing season 2, but not nearly as much as we thought they would, and that's because they were transitioning away from scripted content. So they weren't really that into to helping us anymore. It might have been lower tax or funding costs. It's very possible. The advantage to Kickstarter is that it's the known name, and people kind of already have done Kickstarters, so they've already got an account. If you ask anybody to go in a different crowdfunding platform, you have to ask them to make an account for that one. And sometimes the simple idea of, I have to make another account is enough to make somebody say no, and they're not going to do it. And that crowdfund, we crowdfunded kind of like the barest of minimums that we needed to make season 2. And that was when we still also had support from Geek and Sundry directly, which we no longer do. So LARPs, the budget for LARPs that we would require is to some shockingly high in order to be able to do it properly. And we don't want to commit to anything unless we think we can get that money. And at the moment, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get it. So I don't think that the quest is entirely given up yet, but I will say that unless we hit the requisite names that we need on that mailing pre-registration list, we won't proceed. Had they realized indeed. But look, the reality is the environment for web series has changed vastly since the first web series came out that did really well, and then the sort of like the wave of web series that came out around when we did, where a lot more focus was put on trying to make it a professional production. But the reality is that if we wanted to put out a web series that is of the level of quality of season 2, if we wanted to put that out and we wanted to make sure that everybody got paid, and this is not getting paid what they deserve, but getting paid what is essentially minimum wage, we're looking at something between $300,000 to $500,000 in order to do that, and that's a lot of money to raise. And honestly, LARPs has never been popular enough to reach that. So. C'est la vie. It is the way to do it. Acolyte of Death, you're speaking absolutely correctly. This is a web series. It was a scripted web series that we did, and so it's less of a campaign and more of just like a television show or a web show. In terms of the content that we stream, totally. But we stream it because that's the game that we'd be playing anyway. We're not looking to try and become huge and famous off it. We're doing it because we enjoy playing the game, but also interacting with people while we're playing the game. So that's why we specifically do it. If we were trying to make it a career out of this, then you're absolutely right. Snappier content is much more popular these days. It's easier to get into. It's kind of difficult to get into anything if you're like, well, get ready for this, but it's going to be, 80, 100, 400 hours of content that you have to watch first. You want to watch the entirety of Changeling the Streaming. That is, by my estimate, about 500 hours of content total that we broadcast. Maybe a bit less. Maybe it's more like 450. But yeah, it was a lot. So we totally get that that's not necessarily the thing that'll drive crowds in droves, but we're also totally comfortable with that. Because that's just not why we're doing it. At any rate, so today is just going to be a standard discussion day. People who have ideas or questions that they want to throw out about RPGs, I'm here. We'll totally take a look at them. But while we're waiting for people to filter in, and while people are thinking of their things that they want to bring up, let's have a look. This is so you'll have to excuse the Exaltwitch Academy logo on the bottom. I forgot it was there, and because I forgot it was there, that made it difficult for me to remember that I had to remove it if I was doing something else. Let's also just see if I can get this a little better centered in here. And there we go. So we put that here and then rock up here. There we go. Okay. So this is the PDF that's available. It's free right now. It's on DriveThruRPG. It is a role-playing game that's based around the universe of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. For people who aren't familiar with that universe, it is a animated television show that was put out by Nickelodeon. It was pretty popular. The problem was that Korra, in fact, got yanked, and its last 2 seasons were only shown online. Funnily enough, until it started making its rounds in streaming and DVD sales. But it's continued its popularity through comic books, video games. It had a movie adaptation that people don't like to talk about because it honestly was pretty awful. And now there has been an announcement that Avatar is A, getting a live action series through Netflix, but B, Nickelodeon, through their streaming partner, I think it's Paramount Plus, I forget, because it's not the same in Canada as it is in the United States, is basically creating an Avatar studio responsible for churning out several different properties all in the same universe. So there is much more Avatar to come, and that positions this role-playing game as a good thing to hop onto. So we're going to have a quick look at this Kickstarter, see what kind of decisions that they've made in here. And honestly, I will say that at first glance, I was worried. There, you can see my name because I ordered this. It's free. Go ahead. You just have to purchase it on DriveThruRPG, but you can totally get it. It's legit for you and on your own. The layout of the Quickstart is what kind of makes me feel pretty good about this so far. It doesn't have a whole ton of original art. It's pulling a lot of art that people have seen from the show itself or from marketing material that already exists. But it's well laid out. The editing is pretty solid already. You can kind of tell when a company puts effort into their role-playing games if there's proper editing involved, if the punctuation, grammar, spelling. The layout is a pretty standard 2-column layout, but it's well laid out. We're not seeing a whole lot of orphans or widows. Those are typesetting terms. But it's overall, this has a lot going for it so far. Now, it is relying on a lot of nostalgia. Because I think, if I don't miss my guess, Avatar as a show is going to appeal more, Avatar as a role-playing game is going to appeal more towards adults than it is towards kids, even though it is a show that was originally destined for kids. Requiem. Widows and orphans are lines at the beginning or end of a paragraph which are left dangling at the top or bottom of a page. So if, for instance, you see here, the paragraphs end at the end of the page and then a new one starts. There isn't a whole lot of rollover from one to the next. In fact, in here, they've done a very good job of making sure that they don't exist. Because this is a paragraph that then a second paragraph rolls over onto the next one. That's fine. What you really don't want, though, is you don't want something to say for instance, on this paragraph here, they don't usually mention their clan names when they, and then you have to go to the next page to read, introduce themselves unless it's relevant to the situation or they're trying to, because that's just annoying. But when I talk about things like typesetting, and there is no live action adaptation of Avatar and Ba Sing Se, you're totally correct. Even something as simple as typesetting or editing it's when I say simple, it's simple in that I can notice it, but it is a lot of work to do that properly. And if somebody is going to go to the effort to pay editors and layout designers and layout editors, that means that I'm relatively sure that they're going to be paying for a lot of development as well. And there is an issue with a lot of independent RPGs, which admittedly is because a lot of independent RPGs don't have the money for these sorts of things, where they don't end up doing a whole lot of proofreading or investing in a lot of layout. And as a result, first of all, the product just suffers. And second, it means that it's also likely that the product does not have the kind of rigorous standards that you would be looking for in terms of its playtesting as well. It's the nature of indies, right? And that's something that we've all had to deal with. It's something that we deal with all the time. There's only so many people, so many hours, and so much work that you can put into before you have to start trying to see a return on your investment of that sweat equity that you've put into the product. But this is, I didn't know much about who was putting it out when I first heard about this, but I feel great about this. This is a game also that is powered by the apocalypse. It is based on Powered by the Apocalypse. You can see that that's right here. So Dungeon World, Masks, and Root, and those games kind of have a base of a system that is already quite popular, which means that this is going to be an easier game for people to get into if they've already played other PBTA games. I will admit, first and foremost, I am not a huge Powered by the Apocalypse person off the bat. That isn't to say that I don't think it isn't a good, that I think that it is not a good system. I think it's great. It's just not one that I resonate with personally. But we'll see if maybe in looking through this, that might change a bit. There's a lot to be said about these games that actually help out quite a bit, but they simplify things to a certain degree. And that simplification sometimes is one that I hesitate with a little bit, because I like to be able to dive in and like delve into some crunch. And at the same time, the more that I play, the more I'm realizing that an excess amount of crunch can sometimes make things difficult when they don't have to be. So we're going to take a look. It starts off with your standard kind of, hey, here's some fiction for you to read, which is great. Always fine to throw that in there. But the thing that I kind of like right off the bat in this quick start is that its summary is pretty concise and pretty decent. It doesn't assume that you are an expert in the show, but it also assumes that the player, if they're looking into this, probably has some interest into the game itself. And the way that they put the stuff out there, it's concise, it's to the point, it keeps you reading, and that's really essential when I'm first looking into a game. It's often said that for a new product like this in today's day and age, you have to win someone in the first 5 minutes. And if you don't win them in the first 5 minutes, you don't win them at all. And for some products, it's even less. For mobile games, for instance, it can be the first 60 seconds. And if that first 60 seconds is you looking at a loading screen, and then a character comes up and then it's just dialogue, and you're like, when am I going to get a chance to play the game? That's when people just say, not for me, and they uninstall without ever reaching it. It could be the best game in the world, but if you don't hit them in 60 seconds, they're done. For books, you have a little bit more time, but it's still only about 5 minutes before people start making their first judgments. The art's pretty decent, so that already helps, and the layout is pleasant. The cover already kind of puts it out on Front Street, right? Look at the avatars, so it helps. But these summaries definitely decent in that respect, and I can really appreciate that kind of thing. It does a very good job of breaking down the relatively simple concepts of the Avatar universe, talking about the different nations, and also setting us apart, such as here, setting apart elements that may not necessarily apply in all versions of the game. And the reason why that's important is because the game itself allows you to play in 5 different eras. And the thing that I love is that they are very specific. They're very specific of when these eras are for the hardcore fans. For instance, here it'll say, this covers the events after this novel. This covers the event just before Sojin's Comet in the beginning of the 100-Year War. Like, if you're a fan of the series, you know when it's happening. If you're not a fan of the series, it's okay. It kind of just gives you a, look, you play in this era if this is the theme that you want to deal with. You play in Roku's era if you want to deal with tensions between different nations. If you want to rebel against unjust rule, protect the weak, or stand up to tyranny, play during the war. If you want to deal with healing the world after a tragedy, play in Aang's era. If you want to deal with the repercussions of imperialism and play in a modernized era, play in Korra's era. And I think that's a really good way of doing it. You give the fans, the hardcore fans, your core audience, something that they can latch onto, but you don't leave the rest of them behind. And this is one of the things that I can draw a parallel to the Marvel Universe. The Marvel Cinematic Universe does a lot for people who are fans of the existing comic book. They make sure that there's references sprinkled in. They will alter some aspects of canon, but there's a respect to the original material that's there. And yet people who have never read the comics and who just want to participate in the movies are not left behind. And they feel like they're getting introduced into a world. They get like their pass, and now they get to enjoy and say, like, I am a Marvel fan. And they don't have to have invested those tens, hundreds, or thousands of hours learning about all these things beforehand. So it's there as well, which is something that I really appreciate. And it also explains why there are certain products that don't work. That's part of it. Is definitely not the reason. There's more than one. But it's part of the reason why the DC expanded universe didn't work initially in the movies, because they weren't true to their core, but they also weren't, they were trying to appeal too much to the outside, and the outside didn't care because they heard about the movies from the core, and the core was like, ugh, terrible, bleh, disgusting. So that ends up being an issue. So Osa mentioning that the different eras is a neat touch and letting what sort of adventures you might expect in each era. See, it's simple. And there's nothing that says you have to link up with the themes that they've suggested here. But the fact that they've laid it out and said, hey, here's a bunch of ideas for you, makes it easy to pick. If I had a group of players and we wanted to decide which era we wanted to play in, some people might know the show and be able to say, oh, great, I will play in this era because I liked this era. Whereas others might say, oh, I know that I like this theme that is being presented here, so that's the one I want. And I think that's just fantastic, which really helps. Kaelin's pointing out that era differences also allow players to explore other eras beside what was available or used through the videos and books. Another great point. The television shows specifically only covered, actually, interestingly enough, eras, either Korra's era or just after the 100-Year War era. And that's it. The comics and the novels have expanded it a bit, but those are the only two that we've kind of seen a lot of. So if you want to make your mark on the universe in a different way, and you don't kind of want to step on an era that has already been explored and has its own heroes, hey, Real Brick Wall, then that's something else. Yeah, I believe we're going to be getting more eras from the new Avatar Studios, and I think that this is part of why they're kind of mentioning it. And the fact that they're also marking it down basically in terms of which avatar is present gives us a hint of something that's going to come up a little bit later on in the book. That was That is that because they're listing them by avatar, it's easy to tell where we are, and it also implies that we will not be playing avatars. So let's keep going. Let's have a look. It has, of course, the standard new to RPGs on the sidebar on the right. That sort of thing, great to mention. I think some games these days are starting to leave that out, and I think that's a shame. You never know when someone might be new and this is the first product that they pick up. Sometimes you're like, whoa, this isn't the game for somebody new to RPGs, but it always happens. Remember that a lot of people are introduced to role-playing because a friend or a significant other or a coworker or an acquaintance is already playing in a game and asks if they can bring somebody else into the game. And because of that, it could be any game that they start with. So, yes, you can. And they have said in the Kickstarter that that the game's focus specifically is on having people play, not play the avatar, but there will be rules to allow someone to play the avatar if they want. Yes, Exalted is exactly like that. I would never actually suggest to somebody who is brand new to role-playing, I wouldn't say, well, the first game you should play is Exalted. But I understand that there's going to be times that that's the first game someone's going to play. That's just the way it is. Yes, that is what I understand. The system can hold if there's an avatar without it totally busting the whole game open. But the intention isn't to play the avatar. And I think this is a good point. The reason why I'm kind of... Oh, you started with Shadowrun. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I mean, look, everybody... my first was Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, 2nd edition. It's a complicated game. It's definitely complicated. It's not that it can't be done. It's just more like we have to make our choices as to maybe this isn't the best thing to start. But yeah, Shadowrun's a heck of a starter. I think that it's good that the game is discouraging the use of Avatar as player character, because I think that there's too much of a focus then on one of the characters is special and the other characters are there to prop that character up. It's the same issue, in fact, that I had with the Buffy the Vampire Slayer role-playing game, because one person played the Slayer and everyone else played the Scoobies, which is like such a great way of describing it. And I recognize that some troops can work well like that. Some groups of players will absolutely thrive under those circumstances, but it's not one that I like to encourage. Play 4 avatars. Yeah, there you go. Just go ham. Go hard. So Kung Fu Fenris actually makes a really good point. I can always count on Kung Fu Fenris to bring some unique perspectives from inside. I just hope that the company can deal with this amount of money without floundering. The current head of the company was the financial officer of JWP, who did 7Seas 2nd edition, which went belly up after, at the time, a huge Kickstarter. Possibly. I think that Avatar has something going for it, which is that Avatar's a hot property right now. And in the coming years, it's going to continue getting support, whereas 7th Sea kind of stands on its own and doesn't have a lot of outside support for it. So I'm hoping that that will keep people's interest, but we'll see. Obviously, that's a thing. Yeah, with Doctor Who, same kind of deal. I don't particularly like games, and this is a personal opinion. This is not a design opinion. I don't particularly like playing in games where you have a group of players. Hey, Cragod. And then you have one player who is the special and everyone is surrounding them. So I think that it's a good thing that the game has done here. We've got the section in terms of one person in your game is the game master. So we've got that. We move forward. Love the fact that we've got pro bending right in here. And honestly, if you want to have 4 avatars, play a Dragon Blooded campaign. Yeah, just go for it. Pro bending, honestly, look, in the interest of full disclosure, in terms of background, I think that Avatar: The Last Airbender is the better overall experience. It's a tighter show. I think Korra has higher highs, but it also has lower lows. Korra is more inconsistent, but I loved both series. I think they're both fantastic. And when I saw pro bending, I was like, fuck this. Just give me more pro bending. That's all I want. And they have said that pro bending, rules for pro bending will probably be in their New Republic supplement. So they are seemingly planning on doing additional supplements for this game past this initial Kickstarter campaign. So we'll see. Here's the thing. This game also takes you by the hand. And taking you by the hand is something that'll work out for people who are people who love to run rules as written. So people who love to play games raw, but also people who need the help. It will turn off some people who are more experienced and who like to structure their stories the way that they want to. And for me, that's something that I run into here, because in the starting play, they have things like choose your scope. I think that choosing your scope, the idea of are you doing a game that's only in one temple? Are you doing something that's across all temples? Are you doing something in a huge city? Are you doing something that is the entire world? We got to do the thing. We obviously have to do the thing. Who doesn't love doing the thing? It is absolutely a thing that I think newer players can go to. But then it includes things like this. And there's a few incidents of these things across the PDF. It's possible for your group scope to change over the course of play, but it's likely an indicator you're moving on to a new season of your show. And that I can't find, and maybe it's just because I was skimming it, I can't find reference to seasons as a game mechanic. So I think, this is probably something that's going to happen not outside of the Quickstart when you have the whole book available. But I don't like it. I don't like the idea of it breaking down into seasons right away, because the pacing of a season is something that is an advanced technique. Knowing I have this much time left and this is where I have to wrap things up isn't always easy for people, but we'll see. And then in the next one, it actually straight up says, so this whole section right here, this is how to create story structure 101. Fantastic for new troops who are trying to figure out how to get started. Less good for me, because sometimes I don't want my players to sit around and kind of decide everything before they play it out, because it kind of takes away some of the mystery. But then again, that's just a style choice. I think this is fine. And then it sort of says, okay, so here are the first 3 episodes. And some of the first 3 acts of the first episode. And what I'm curious about is that this seems more along the lines of the session 0 of how did we meet? Why are we together? But it also implies a bit of extra story right at the beginning. So, they're adding the characters as stretch goals. Toph is, by the way, there were questions about why hasn't Toph been added to the game. She's in the base game. So she's not a stretch goal. She's already in. So character creation, in terms of Powered by the Apocalypse, it's all about playbooks. Your playbook basically is a page or a set of pages. You know what? Let's scroll right down to a playbook so that we can see it right off the bat. Let's try to go for the first one, because that's often, here we go. So here's the bold playbook. The thing about playbooks is that it sort of condenses all the things that you need onto 1 or 2 pages. And it's a much broader, more character-focused version of playbooks. It's sort of like, if you have a playbook, these are the things that you need to focus on when you're playing the game. Instead of having to know the rules for every character, you can kind of focus on your own. And Powered by the Apocalypse bases its stuff around moves. So the idea is that players can take a move, you describe what you're trying to do, and then the game master interprets what you're doing as a move. Now, there are basic moves. Let's go up here. Let's bounce around. Why not? So there are basic moves. So basic moves can be things like rely on your skills and training, or assess a situation, or plead. And these are things that if you like pleading with an NPC could be you going up and just talking to an NPC over a long period of time and eventually trying to get them to accept to your cause. It could be that you straight up say, please don't hurt me. But the reality ends up being that you can break down what people are trying to do into a basic move. And you roll to find out whether you get things the way that you want with these moves. And that's basically it. Is you figure out what the move is, you do the move. But your playbook unlocks some special moves for yourself, moves that are specific. So you can choose a couple of moves, and then as you earn experience in the game, you get to buy more moves. So for instance, this is a move, not done yet. So once per session, when you're taken out, so when you're basically knocked out of combat, shift your balance towards center, a game mechanic we'll get to soon, to stay up for one more exchange of a conflict. So basically, shift your balance to stay up for one more round, and then afterwards you're taken out. So it's sort of like a last-ditch effort that you have that you can do. And also, you can, your legacy of excellence here is, these are the things that you have to do in order to level up. This is a different way of interpreting experience because for some players, they're going to treat this as a checklist that they're trying to knock everything out. And that's that's sometimes a little directive. You'll have players who, instead of focusing on the story, instead of focusing on what they would do naturally, playing the character, they're trying to, like, for instance, if they've chosen punch someone you probably shouldn't punch, they're going to focus as much as they can on punching somebody who they wouldn't punch. They're just going to look for the first opportunity to do it, whether it's appropriate or not, smash somebody in the face, and at the end of the session, they can say, I punched somebody I didn't need to punch. Boom. One more step towards getting more powerful. For some player groups, this is going to work out really well because it also helps give you some ideas of where you can go and what you should be doing with your character. And for some, it's going to end up being a chase to see who can fulfill their legacies first and foremost. So it is worth trying to figure out whether that's going to work out for your group. At any rate. But that's basic Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. They do a good job of making sure that you can also fit in with the world. Sometimes role-playing games that are based on existing properties don't do a good job of this. But for instance, it gives you ideas on how to name your character if they're from the various different kingdoms, Earth Kingdom, Air Nomads, Water Tribes, or Fire Nation. They sort of give ideas and suggestions on how their naming structures are set up. And I imagine that in the full book, they'll go further into detail about these sorts of things. And then there's training. All characters are either a bender, so water bending, earth bending, fire bending, or air bending, or they're good at hand-to-hand combat. So this would be like a Sokka, or technology, and that would be like an Asami from Korra. Different characters don't necessarily need different trainings, but they can help make them feel distinct. So you could play an all waterbender group if you wanted to, or you can mix it up. And you then also pick a signature fighting style. So not all waterbenders will fight the same way because you will have waterbenders who will have different fighting styles. So there is, and then we move on to things like backgrounds. So you choose up to 2 backgrounds to describe your upbringing. They can have some mechanical effects. A lot of this is also role-playing. But one of the ways that this is also good is that it ties into existing characters in the show. So you can say, oh, I want to be more like Iroh. Well, maybe you want to look into military as being one of the things, as one of your backgrounds. Or if you wanted to be more like, say, Zuko, that's down in the privileged category because Zuko basically was brought up as a prince before anything else. Oh yeah, the author list is great. I'm super... Mendes Hodes is just like... Anyway, and then demeanors, so ways your characters might behave in social situations, history, and there are 4 stats. So this is not a game which overloads you with a whole ton of stats for you to worry about. There's only 4: creativity, focus, harmony, and passion. And these are ways when you approach an action. Some actions will always call for one of these specific stats. Some you pick the stat that is the stat that is appropriate to that situation. Fatigue is mental and physical exhaustion, which kind of works in a show where it's kind of plays fast and loose with injury. This sort of helps out in that respect because honestly, in a show like Avatar, I don't think you would want to start tracking like exactly how much damage have I taken. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm just getting to that, so maybe we'll just bring it up now. Most Interesting Critter says, I think it's really cool that the playbooks are formed around personality archetypes instead of the bending styles. So I'm going to skip ahead. We'll come back. But there's a whole section here that says, what about bending? And I'll read. You'll notice that aside from choosing which training you want during character creation, very little of the process of making a character for Avatar Legends the RPG is about bending. That's not an accident. Bending is a huge part of the game, but it might not show up in the way you're expecting. In Avatar The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, most of the heroes are benders, capable of amazing feats. The ones who aren't benders are often incredible masters of weapons or technology that rival bending itself, holding their own against capable benders in tough situations and sometimes even triumphing. But regardless of their bending prowess or other fantastic abilities, the stories of Avatar Legends characters aren't really about their bending. Instead, the characters use their bending to go on adventures in the service of their broader story, finding the role they have to fill in the world, exploring the drive inside their heart that moves them, caring for the people in their lives that matter. Bending in Avatar Legends the RPG works the same way. You use it constantly, but it's not your story. All of the trainings, including bending, are tools your characters uses to get stuff done. Whether that's fighting to protect the innocent from immediate harm, or attempting to convince the political leaders of a place to take the problems of ordinary people seriously. What does that look like in the game? Trainings don't have a lot of limits, so you get a chance to say when and how your training is useful. Sometimes it's obvious. I want to waterbend that boat back to us so we can save the people on it, but sometimes it's a bit more subtle. I want to earthbend out little handholds all the way up the side of this building so we can climb it. Either way, the mechanics of Avatar Legends the RPG are going to both support and challenge you as you use your powers. As you push yourself to accomplish great things with your training, you'll find costs and complications that make those accomplishments meaningful. When things are easy, like lighting a small fire with your firebending, you won't need to invoke the mechanics at all. Just remember, your training is always real. You can't waterbend a boat to you if you can't waterbend. If you're a firebender or earthbender, if you're a firebender, you'll have to swim to that boat instead. And there are special combat techniques that are only available to masters of bending, weapons or technology, skills like lightning redirection or metal bending that must be learned from others on your journey. And I really like the fact that this game is not focusing on your training specifically and focusing a lot on the abilities of your ability to bend. Because they're very true, is that bending is not what makes the show interesting. The Avatar is powerful, partially because the Avatar has access to all 4 elements, partially because they're naturally strong benders, and partially because they have access to the Avatar state. But the show's not about Aang incrementally upping up his power level. The show is about him getting past his own blocks and moving forward. And bending is a way to represent that. He has difficulty with firebending, and it's not, but if he doesn't master fire, then we're all screwed. That's not really the point. The point is, what is it about firebending that Aang has to get past, and what is the deal? And that's more interesting. So the fact that this is what's made it into the game leads me to feel very good about their progress going forward. I want to have more focus on the characterization as opposed to the funky mechanics, especially because bending is incredibly versatile. Describe a waterbender and they can waterbend like Katara, they can waterbend like Korra, they can waterbend like any of the other waterbenders that we've encountered on the show. It's tough to start describing also the very specifics. And I don't want to start getting into the nitty gritty of what is it that I can do exactly with my bending at this point in time. That level of crunch doesn't appeal to me if I'm trying to run a game set in this universe, because it's not really the point for me of what that is. So it's also really interesting. I find that they basically come out and say, hey, you could also play somebody who is not a bender and you're not going to be left behind. I'm hoping that in the final game, it becomes very clear that you have just as interesting choices being, if your training is involved in combat. Sorry, I will point out here the where is it? Because I just left it all behind. Yeah, there it is, training. So you can either rely on your bending, but there's also hand-to-hand combat and there's technology. And I think that both of those can provide for really interesting things, because as much as sometimes in the show, there were questions of, well, what can I do? I'm just I am not a bender. And then the show goes out of its way to show how people who are not benders can still go to great lengths to affect the world. Sokka isn't a bender. Suki isn't a bender. And yet they were integral parts of that team. So worth having a look. Kaylin wants to be a bloodbender. Oof, all right, well, you do you. So after the stats and fatigue, conditions are something that's also found in Powered by the Apocalypse. So conditions are things that sort of affect the way that you're going. And then there's balance. So this is another aspect which I think is interesting that they're pulling from the Avatar mythos and they're putting it onto all the characters. You pick, based on your playbook, you have two principles, and those principles are in conflict. And if you act too much in the context of a principle, then it becomes easier to act in that principle, but harder to act in the other one. And if you're shifted too far off balance, then it can actually go ill for you. There's also powerful moves that are only available if you are centered, if your balance between your two principles is equal. So I think that this is a great way to sort of shift it. This is a little bit like in Exalted, the intimacy system, and being able to manipulate somebody through their intimacies. You can manipulate other characters, either NPCs or PCs, based on their balance. So for an example, if your playbook is the bold, then your balance is between loyalty and confidence. So if you are acting in situations in which loyalty becomes very important, it might imply that you are acting for other people and not necessarily acting of your own, of being confident in what you are capable of yourself. Whereas if you are acting too much in terms of your own confidence, if you're getting a little too big for your own britches, then you might start valuing yourself over those around you. And I think that that's the kind of interesting choice that you could find in a game like this, because there are mechanical advantages to being unbalanced, but there are disadvantages as well. So there are choices that you can make. For combat techniques, every playbook includes a combat technique that's unique to that playbook. In the full game, you can choose to either take your playbook's special combat technique or something that's based on your favorite fighting style. So there's different ways to make your character feel your own. Helpful in a PBTA game because you don't want your characters to feel kind of too generic. At the end of game, you basically have to answer questions about how you've grown as a character. And depending on which of those questions you can answer yes, you gain experience. Very similar to a lot of other games with point-buy systems. Good to see them here. Connections, a way to tie you to the rest of the world. Excellent to see in this sort of thing. And this is also a reaction, I think, from a lot of game designers to help pull players away from that whole, I am an orphan, my village burned down, I have nothing left, I have no connection to the world, I am a lone wolf wandering in a strange, desolate place. Which honestly makes telling a lot of stories kind of difficult, and it gets really fucking boring. So I am down for putting connections in there. Playing the game plays out just like a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games. Works for me. Not something that I'm going to be too focused on, because this is, again, like quite a bit of other PBTA games. But they've done a pretty good job of creating that balance situation here. Want to recap what, Kung Fu Fenris? Sorry, you're on a delay, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. Because I'd be glad to recap things. Because then there are balance moves. There's ways to shift someone else's balance, try to resist someone shifting yours, living up to your principle. The standard Powered by the Apocalypse playstyle. So we went over it before you got here, Kung Fu Fenris, but I'll recap it quickly. You describe what you want to do, and the Game Master interprets what your description is as a move. There are standard moves that all characters have access to. There are some moves that are only available on your sheet, your playbook, as it were. And then, based on that move, you have the rules in order to proceed. You roll 2d6, and on a 7 or above, you succeed. On a 10 or above, you succeed well. 7 to 9, sometimes there are compromises. And also you roll 2d6, but you also add to that total or subtract to that total based on your stats or other extenuating circumstances. So a lot of it is kind of interpretation by the Game Master, sometimes by players as well, but it leans heavily, it's more focused on not rolling before the conversation reaches a certain point. So once a move is identified, that's when you make the move. But otherwise, it's a conversation game up to that point. It can put, depending on the player group that you're with, it can put a lot of burden on the Game Master to interpret when a move is appropriate. But honestly, not really any more so than other role-playing games in a lot of ways. Powered by the Apocalypse is a pretty decent system for people who don't want to delve into a ton of crunch, but are still interested in making sure that it feels like a game. So there's an earthbender for you, Kaylin. Go for that. Go for Bolin. He loves you too. And then in the rest of the book, there's information for how to run the game. There's offering, if you get stuck in the game, what you can do. So these are just basic GM advice. And then there's a pre-made campaign that you can run through and have a look at that. Here comes the clock. So the clock, definitely something that we've seen before. I think the clock is a good mechanic. Yep, there's pre-generated characters as well. But there's a whole, and this is, honestly, there's quite a bit here. A whole adventure that you can run through. Information on your basic moves. Character creation worksheet, or campaign creation worksheet, which is helpful for a group that's kind of getting into it in the first bit. So you can pick which... it's... on this page, it's literally 4 avatars and Sozin being a dick during the 100 Years' War. So this is kind of helpful if you want that sort of hand-holding to build a campaign. And then characters here. The characters feel like they have been well created, well researched. They're definitely the sort of thing that you can pick up and slap down in front of a player and say, here you go for it. Honestly, some really good stuff here. And then they have the 6 playbooks that are included with the Quickstart in case you want to build your own game right off the bat. And that's it. that's the Quickstart. It is 55 pages long, including the cover and the rest. But I'll also point out that they straight up mention safety tools, even though it's intended to be a family-friendly game. So I'm glad to see that there. We'll see if they expand that section in the full game. But my overall impressions of the Quickstart are actually quite positive. I'm not somebody who typically goes in for Powered by the Apocalypse. This might be the game that makes me take the leap and try it. We'll see. It's not coming out yet. Typically when people do these things, this game is probably close to being completed if it isn't completed already. But the estimated delivery date for the PDFs is January 2022. Never thought you'd see the day? Well, part of it is that I think that the universe of Avatar is a really interesting one. It's cool. And it manages, and look, I absolutely know this, and I'm this has been a topic of contention in my own mind for a while. But much like Exalted, Avatar, the world of Avatar manages to avoid the problematic elements for me of streaming a game like Legend of the Five Rings. Legend of the Five Rings looks like it'd be a really interesting game to play, but it looks like it's also a game that's very much focused on a culture that I am not a part of, and therefore I can't necessarily feel like I can accurately portray it. And if I was alone, if I was playing, not alone, but if I was playing in private with my friends, it'd be a lot easier to play that game. And I think that it might be really fun, but it's not. We're streaming. Same thing with Scion. I don't feel comfortable portraying a Scion game to a wide audience because it basically takes cultures from all over the world, cultures that I am not necessarily well versed in, at least not all of them, and then basically says, go for it, you white champion. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. It's not easy for me to tell those stories in an open forum without feeling or risking like I would be doing a disservice to them. Now, the world building in Avatar is based on cultures on Earth, but there's enough of a separation that I don't feel like I'm basically playing in a sandbox that I shouldn't be. So it helps. Rokugan is very, very based on Japanese mythology and history. There's other nations in there as well, but they include like real world terms like Bushido, and there's this sort of intense kind of feeling of this isn't necessarily the greatest place for me to start stomping around and putting my own will in. And all the damn Japanese gods. Yeah, exactly. The kami and all that. I like how the captions have said Japanese Godzilla. It's like, so yeah, it's not as helpful, but Exalted, despite the fact that it draws on quite a bit of Eastern mythology, manages to avoid that. I believe Avatar does as well. So I don't feel as bad. Now, that's not to say also, for instance, a cast system that's really not too far. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to get too far into it. We've discussed The Legend of the Five Rings before. I still think that it's an interesting, cool game, and I think that if you want to play it, you totally can, and it doesn't make you like a bad person for wanting to play it or develop for it or whatever. It's just not something that I'm comfortable streaming for myself and my group. But Avatar, go for it. And obviously, I'm gonna state here though that I think that when you it's different. For instance, when the movie that there is no live action adaptation in Ba Sing Se, but when they straight up said, okay, well, we're gonna make some of the protagonists here white instead of Inuk, which is what they were based on in the animated series, it just felt fucking weird. But there's a big difference between, casting a live action series and playing in a role playing game. So There is a difference between inspired by and based on. Absolutely. The live action movie, it's more like, why would you cast somebody white? There are plenty of people who you could cast who are not white, who would be a great pick. And Elizabeth was actually telling me a couple of days ago that it is rumored that they have cast the characters for the live action Netflix show. And it seems like they're doing a good job of making sure that they are not whitewashing the damn show. Inuit, sorry. An Inuk. Several Inuit. Appreciate it, Kaylin. Kaylin, who actually knows way more about this stuff than I do. I am a pretender in this arena, but I believe Katara, in fact, is somebody who is a Montreal-based actor, and she was in Beans, which is about the Oka crisis around here. So, anyway, we're getting into a territory where I definitely don't feel like I have the expertise to speak on. It feels like they just hand-waved Sokka. I mean, I also think that there's a lot of things that Shyamalan didn't understand about that. Yeah, the Oka crisis. Big oof. Big oof. So yeah, am I going to back this? I think I'm pretty solidly on the line of yes, I'm going to back it. Whether I back it with the physical books or whether I back it with just the PDFs, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to investigate in things like how much is it going to cost to ship and all of that. But it also looks like the materials that they're offering are pretty cool. The physical rewards, there's a journal pack. There are the journal pack is a pack of 5 6x9-inch booklets with approximately 30 blank pages for you and your fellow players to use for campaign and player notes, which is nice. Definitely not required, but it's nice to have. There are dice, which are, because the dice are just standard 2d6s, you get 5 sets of 2d6, and each of them have one of the bending symbols on them, I think in place of the 6. Shipping from the US currently is balls. Ugh, that's too bad. Yeah, so it is not custom dice. They are just, okay, so they're custom dice, but the game doesn't rely on custom dice. The game assumes that you're just rolling standard 6-sided dice. The dice that are customized for this game are not required for the game. They're not. It's not like Genesis dice or the like, but they are. But they're just cool looking dice. I mean, I can see them right here. Can I bring them up? Should we have a look at the Kickstarter page? Why not? Let's do that. Boom. All right, let's size this so that it can be seen properly. Because I also want to make sure that it's easily seen by everybody here on the stream. Burp. You don't have to look at my bookmarks. Okay, there we go. So the dice pack, as you can see here, they're just standard 6-sided dice, but they've replaced one of the faces with the symbols for the earth, air, fire, water, weapons, and technology, which is pretty cool. You also get a dice bag, which has the 4 elements on it. So, like, this is kind of cute. Honestly, these are the kind of rewards that I really like to see. They're not that expensive to make, and you get all of the physical rewards if you donate at a certain level, which is handy. That's only part of my bookmarks. But yeah, so they also have various add-ons that you can add to it. So there's things like a combat action deck. So these are cards that will help as you're running combat to just remind you of certain rules. They have a cloth map, just in case you just feel like you want to have that. They have a deluxe dice bag. So they even have deluxe dice if you really wanted to get hardcore into it. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so at a certain level, at the Otter Penguin level, you'll get the combat deck, the dice bag, the dice, a hardcover copy of the book, these separate physical add-on books that they're planning on, the cloth map, an expanded playing handbook, the journals. It's a lot. Like, that's a lot to give out. And then you can even go higher than that and you can get a special custom cover. I mean, if that's what you want. If you go even higher than that, you can get the special dice with a special dice bag, which can be really cool. I really like how these days retailers, and you have to prove that you're a retailer, you can buy 4 copies of these sorts of things so that you get a 50% discount so that you can help stock your store with these sorts of things. And I think, but these don't include books. So that's interesting because I think that they can get that from a distributor for cheaper. But you can get the stretch goals for these things, which is really cool if you want to be able to offer that to your customers, which is super cool. But like, this is a great Kickstarter campaign. They know what they've got. They have all of that sort of set up. I think that it's a very cool way to go about doing this. Like, honestly, I'm super down. So I'm not sure if I would go for the physical rewards at this point, but I think that the PDF is something that I'll buy for sure, and then we'll see. Maybe I will. Who knows? But like, we have confirmation that they're going to include various legends that you can encounter on your in your journey. So these are ways to portray characters that people have already seen. So we have statted out Azula, statted out Suki, statted out Sokka, Tenzin, Katara. I mean, a lot of these stretch goals, honestly, like, were they ever going to not have Katara? Like, probably goddamn not. But at any rate. And after seeing the combat system, the cards are amazingly useful, so that's useful to know. That's definitely good to know. But like, it's nice that we have characters like Asami, because Asami is the best. You know, Zuko, Ty Lee, Kuvira, like, all sorts of great stuff. And then it turns out that they've added just a single White Lotus Pai Sho tile, which is just like, aw. They've also have some actual plays that have existed. So they've got some other content creators who have done some Avatar already. So that's cool to see. So clearly they're doing that. The team, it's like some definitely good people on the team for this. Names that I've recognized. And, oh, there's shipping. Okay. So, and they have it broken down by your pledge level, so that's really good. So, $20 shipping. Ow, but not the worst. But they cover the cost of customs and VAT for those reasons. Okay, so that helps a little bit. That helps. A Sky Bison plushie. I mean, I think you can get those already, but yeah, that would be a cool thing to have. And then if we look at the FAQ, are they going to translate it other than English? They only have rights for the English language, but we'll see. There's no GM screen, but you wouldn't really need one for Powered by the Apocalypse, which is also fine. I realized I don't use GM screens, so I don't care. No miniatures because they don't have the rights. So at least they are upfront with saying what they can and can't do, which I kind of like. Do I need more than one combat deck? No, one is sufficient. Great. Do the dice have numbers on them? Yes, they do. Exactly, Osub. But a lot of places don't bother. You think Fantasy Flight would get their shit together when it comes to that, but they really don't. Do they come with both regular and deluxe dice / bags? Yes, it comes with both, so that's even better. Let's see. Can it be a one-player game? It shines at 3 to 5 players. Thank fuck. That helps. I'm glad that they mentioned that. Will there be more bending styles like metal bending? So they're going to feature mechanics for sub-styles of bending in the core book. So good to know. Of course, their supplements will also feature even more info on bending, like combustion bending, like Sparky Sparky Boom Man, otherwise known as Combustion Man. Will there be resources for virtual tabletop play? And they're looking into it. I imagine this might end up being a problem for them because of licensing, but we'll see. I have a question about the rules, so you can just head onto their Discord and talk about it and all that. Can people play the avatar? The focus of the game is on teams of heroes, but we will include some info on allowing a player to play the avatar, so I kind of like that. Is it compatible with D&D? No, because not everything has to be D&D, you jackals. Stuff about spirits. Will pro bending be in the core book? No, but we will deal with pro bending in the Republic City supplement. Makes sense. Where's Toph? In one of the adventure booklets. That's why she's not a stretch goal. We couldn't leave her out. So, handy for that. Oops. Let's put ourselves back here. So, in the end, yeah, I really like it. I really like the look of it. As a game, it looks like it's probably going to be a lot of fun to play. If you're an Avatar fan, it looks like it's doing a good job of respecting the core audience, but also being open to other audience members. So yeah, I absolutely would go for it. I think that this is, and the fact that they released the Quickstart, and the Quickstart seems to have some interesting stuff, leads me to believe that the rest of the game will still be definitely worth the price of admission. So I can't say that this is like an official RPGClinic endorsement because I'm only one guy, but I can say that I'm planning on kickstarting this. So that is that's that for that part of it. I'm not sure whether any of you are already planning on doing this. I'm not even sure how many of you are big time Avatar fans, but I know that even if you're not necessarily, now's probably a pretty good time to start looking into it. I know that Netflix still carries Avatar in some areas. I'm not sure if it does in all. Do I think that I'll play it here? So, NFL, here's the way that we look at the games that we have. We sort of learned our lesson when we played Changeling. First, we played Exaltwitch Nexus, and back then it was just known as Exaltwitch, and we went on for 56 episodes of that, I think, something along those lines. And first, we were only playing every 2 weeks, and then we started playing every week because we realized that's what we wanted to do, and it kind of helped keep continuity. And it was a lot of fun. But it was also kind of long, and we were like, all right, well, we should move on to that. Do I have new glasses? Yes. Luke, you are the first person to notice, which means you got a gold star. But yeah, these are new glasses that I have. My prescription has changed very slightly, but I realized also my glasses were quite old. They were pretty scratched up, so it handles. So yes, Changeling, the streaming was a huge undertaking. That was over 130 episodes plus bonus content. And we realized that if we just keep playing forever, we might enjoy it. You might enjoy it, but it also sort of ties us up a little bit. And it's, thanks, Kung Fu Fenders. Appreciated. So what are we doing at this point? We are going to, we've done now seasons. So when we're playing a game, we basically make a commitment that we're going to play a certain number of games. Seasons typically for us are around 20 episodes. And then once we get to that point, we then decide, do we want to continue or not? And we also try to structure the events in the campaign so that if you start at a season, you're not really that far behind because everything can be summed up. We did a recap video for season 1 of Exalted Witch Academy, and it's 2 minutes long. And it basically tells you what you need to know to get involved in the game at the start of season 2. So when season 2 of Exalted Witch Academy is over in 16 weeks, so, like 3 to 5 months time, because we've also decided that we want to be at least a little bit flexible, right? We don't want to end something exactly at episode 20 if 2 more episodes would make a difference for us. But once we get to that point, what we do is we take a break and we do some one-shots. We sort of cleanse the palate a little bit. There are games that we want to play that are not suitable for like full campaigns, but that we might still want to get to take a chance to look at. Like we've run Fiasco, we've run Lady Blackbird, we've done Roll for Shoes. In our most recent break, we played Lasers and Feelings, which was super cool as well. And we played Good Society at one point. I know that we want to play Alice is Missing, hopefully at some point. We want to play... we've had some calls for like Blades in the Dark. We played Paranoia at one point. We've had a whole bunch of different ones that we've looked at. And it's sort of our chance to do that then. But then when we move on, we can either choose to renew, so we keep playing the same campaign. We can also put a campaign on pause and play something different if we want, or we can play a new game. Which is a very long-winded way of saying, are we going to play Avatar? I don't know. And the main reason why is because it's not my decision. It's our decision. Primarily, it's a decision of the 4 of us. So every time that we start considering a new game, we pull from all kinds of different sources and we put them all in a document and we pitch to each other the kinds of games that we'd like to see. And we really do go to a lot of effort to make sure that the 4 of us are going to be happy with what we're going to play, because it's no good if 3 people are super into a game and the 4th person's like, I don't want to play this. I would never play this, in which case we're kind of at an impasse. So everybody would have to agree that they wanted to play it, and we'd have to want to play that game over other games. Like right now we're playing Exalted Essence because we definitely enjoy the world of Exalted. We really are having fun with that. Fantastic. We enjoyed it enough that we decided to renew from 3rd edition into Essence for our 2nd season. For the season after this, I don't know. We tried playing Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and it didn't work out as well as we'd have hoped. I mean, like, the campaign wrapped. We still overall had a good time, but I was struggling specifically with the game, and we realized that it wasn't something that was going to be sustainable for us in the long run, so we ended up stopping. We only had one this break due to Scott and Liz moving, which is absolutely true. We needed to kind of cover for that, but yeah, and we may also start doing one-shots potentially, during the week if we can. Some of it is also if we want to and if we can handle it, right? Because here's the dirty little secret about Clinic Hours. Clinic Hours is a show that I don't. Hey, Lo. Damn good to see you. Clinic Hours is a show that I try to do with as little prep as I can. And the reason why is because I have no idea how many people are going to show up for any one show, but also I just don't have a ton of time. I also have a Sunday game that I got to prepare for. And yes, I know I improv a lot, but that doesn't mean I don't do preparation. And so it's possible that we may at some point swap out certain episodes of Clinic Hours for one-shots. We've done this in the past. Kate and I ended up playing Star-Crossed at one point. I don't think it was for Clinic Hours. It might have. No, I think it was on a Sunday. But like we have played one-shots in the middle of campaigns, especially if, for instance, we know that some of our players can't make it on Sunday. Hey, Girl Wonder Ann. Thanks for the follow. I like the way the glasses change in the light and they suit me. Thank you very much, Luke. I really appreciate that. I went out on a limb. I tried something different. I've never actually had colored frames like this. They've always either been like black or silver. The last one that I had was tortoiseshell, but that was still mostly black. So I was trying to do something else. One shots could be in the future, especially because if I don't have a topic for clinic hours, it kind of makes it difficult, because then it's sort of like, well, I sure hope people come up with great questions to ask, because we did do some amazing stuff with the Changeling solos. That was a lot of fun. It's a little harder to do in Exalted. It's not impossible, but it's a little harder to do in Exalted because people tend to stick together a bit more for those, but we'll see. We'll see. There's also other projects that we're working on. There are other shows that we are developing quite slowly, but there's some ideas for shows that we might put on this channel as a break. Shows that aren't necessarily just like a Q&A show, but we do have ideas on other things that might be really interesting. Some shows that may involve more audience participation. And we also have one other project that we're working on with currently that hopefully we'll be able to talk about soon. I realize that it sounds a whole lot of teasing, kind of being like, well, we've got a lot in the can. You don't know what it is yet. But trust me when I say this, the reason why we're not talking about it right away is because I don't want to disappoint if things fall through. And I also don't want to talk about something so early that if it's, that it'll get people excited and then be like, well, it's only going to happen in weeks or months or decades. And that just, we're not nearly as a big enough company that can generate enough hype to get people hyped and stay hyped for 3 years, right? We're no Valve. So anticipation is half the enjoyment when it finally happens. You will find out about it before it happens. We're not going to like drop it one day and be like, there it is. But we're just not ready to talk about things just yet. So you'll have to be patient, but we are looking at not only different show ideas for RPG Clinic as a Twitch channel, but also the idea of other projects. And one project that we're still working on that we have to get back to at some point is our safety card initiative, to try to get our safety card system finalized and out there as a release that we're proud of, so that people can also reference it for their own games. We found it a tool useful for us. It's not necessarily a tool for everybody, but we do think that for some people it will be a tool as or perhaps more useful than, say, a simple X card or just lines and veils. We are not doing it for money. We are very specifically not doing it for money. Our hope is to be able to distribute this in a downloadable fashion, so that it's free. And for people who want to purchase physical versions of the cards, they can, but it will be at cost or as close to cost as we can make it, to make it worthwhile. We're still not sure whether it's the sort of thing that like we'll put them on print on demand things like MPC or drive-through cards, or whether we'll get a whole bunch of cards and then be able to ship them out ourselves. Like there are a lot of questions that kind of surround these sorts of things. We just have to take the time to sit down and do it. And unfortunately, in terms of time, all four of us are at kind of tumultuous times. We all moved in the past few months. And that's not an easy thing. So, there's some of that. Plus, we're kind of inching our way out of a pandemic, and that makes some things a little hard. So we're working on it. We're working on a bunch of different things. But the final thing that I'll point out is that if there's something you want to see, tell us. We can't necessarily say yes to everything, obviously. But if there's something that you're like, for instance, when NFL asks, like, are you going to play Avatar on this thing? If you're interested in seeing Avatar being played by us, one way to make it a little more likely is to mention it, to say, I want to see you play this game. That would be cool. Or we've seen a bunch of people make some suggestions. I'm sure there must be more out there, and we love to hear them, because we also know you're an amazing, fantastic community, that you're also not going to kind of say, well, you didn't choose the one thing I wanted you to choose, so I hate you forever and I'm never watching you again. Although honestly, if you said that, then I would say, great, because I don't want anybody to watch us if they don't want to. We're in this for fun. But if there's other shows that you want to see, as opposed to just like a straight up actual play or let's play of a game, let us know. If there's projects that you want to see, throw it out there, because we are interested. And it is sometimes a lot easier for us to commit to something if we see consistent interest in it, as opposed to just a silent wall, as it were. Right. I have to make sure that I shift around a little bit in this chair while I'm here, because I spend a lot of my day sitting right here because I'm not working. I'm here. Well, Kung Fu Fenris, that's incredibly appreciated, and it is very kind of you to say so, because that's kind of what I want all of us to do. Look, it's been a rough time for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And, we're trying to crawl our way out of it. We're not done yet, especially now a fourth wave looks inevitable in my neck of the woods anyway. And while we do have vaccines, and while I'm hoping that it means that we're going to be able to stay in the same room when we play, because all four of us are fully vaccinated at this point. We don't know for sure if that's going to be the case. Laws may change. Restrictions may be reintroduced. So we'll see. I know that a vaccine passport is basically going to be a thing in Quebec starting next month. Non-essential spaces will only be able to remain open if you can prove that you are vaccinated. So we'll see. Questions out of the blue. I absolutely love questions out of the blue, especially because we still have another 30 minutes to go on this stream, and we kind of discussed everything that we needed to with the Quickstart. So it's an okay solution. Yeah. I mean, I'm under no illusions here. I want everyone to feel happy and safe. And I also know that life can't exist without at least a little bit of risk. So grab some ice from a Coke. I hope your Coke needs the ice. I will hydrate because I do not wish to dehydrate. If I were making my own... Okay, so here, let's call this up. Let's do this properly. We have the technology. Let's use it. Requiem asks, if I were making my own tabletop role-playing game, what would I want to include mechanics-wise that I've either not seen in other games or rarely see in other games? That's an incredibly... Royal Crown. Oh, I miss Royal Crown. I don't drink it anymore. I kind of shouldn't, so I don't. But Royal Crown, so good. If I were making my own TTRPG, so Requiem Lost... that is indeed a very interesting question. It is also a question that's right out of the blue. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer you the way that you would like. And part of that is that I'll point out, first and foremost, that game design is my job. So a lot of my design brain is right off into other things right now. And I haven't been thinking a whole lot about game design for new tabletop role-playing games. I'll have to see if I can switch gears enough for you there. What would I want to include mechanics-wise that I haven't seen in other games or rarely see in other games? Alternate RNG is interesting to me. No. I love the random questions. I'm going to see if I can try. I just mean I can't kind of flop out a design document right now and be like, there you go, because just don't have it. But I'll say that if I had to pick something right away, it would be alternate methods of RNG, or I suppose what would be a better way to put it is alternate methods of introducing chaos into a game. I am a huge fan of games like Dread and Starcrossed, which use a Jenga tower. I think that's a fascinating way to play. I think Deadlands using a standard poker deck is a very cool way to look at that. And I would try to find a mechanic that I think would be really cool and neat, because as much as I like dice, and I think that dice are super cool, I also like the idea that players can manipulate the game in other ways. And there are questions, of course, sometimes this reduces your game's accessibility. Not everybody can play Jenga, for instance. But I also think that these are mechanics that I'd like to look into. I had a ton of fun running Paranoia the way that I did in the one-shots that we ran before Exaltwitch Academy. The first season, not the one in the middle. We had... I think that people had a lot of fun, and that was just me messing around and pulling inspiration from an already existing gimmick from an already existing television show and putting it into a game where the mechanics don't really make that much of a difference. And I really enjoyed what came out of that. I had a lot of fun. I would hope that my players had a lot of fun. And while I don't think that particular game is the sort of sustainable thing that you can choose for like a long-running campaign, it shook things up. It made things different, and it made things interesting. So for people who aren't aware, Dread and Starcrossed use a Jenga tower. And when you attempt to do something that would normally call for a roll of the dice, you would have to instead pull blocks from the tower and put them on top. And if you succeeded, then everything went the way that you wanted to. And if you didn't succeed, if the tower fell, in Dread, this means your character dies or is otherwise removed from the game. And in Starcrossed, it means that the story is over and that you move to the sort of like epilogue of the situation. Dread is a horror game very specifically, so the mechanics of a Jenga tower is wonderful for that, because the teetering tension of the tower provides a lot of sort of drama. And every time that you ask, okay, you can do this, but it's going to cost you, you have to pull 1, 2, or 3 bricks. And just the idea of, you're reaching and the tower is shaking just a little bit back and forth, and you're not sure if you're doing this the way that and then you put it on top, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief, but they know that inevitably that tower is going to fall. Fantastic. It is a fantastic atmosphere for a game. And the same thing happens in Starcrossed. That tension echoes the tension of a relationship that shouldn't occur. The nervous energy that you get when you're with somebody who you are so into, and you think that they might so be into you too, but you're not sure. You're not sure if you can move forward, and you're not sure if it's even appropriate for you to do so. It matches. Other examples, when Scott ran 10 Candles, having 10 actual candles lit on the table, and knowing that if a candle goes out, that's the end of the scene. That's another interesting thing, because then you are watching the flames and you're kind of holding on to that light, and the light continues to die out as you play. And it's an evocative set piece for the players to interact with. I love the idea of using props in that way, that is not necessarily just a prop that a storyteller hands a player, but that is a part of the game itself. And that, see you later, Kaylin. It's good to see you. That is something that I think that I would want to investigate more. The idea of bringing in outside props into a game. Icarus has a similar mechanic. When your dice roll failures, you add them to the tower. When the tower falls, so does the city of Icarus. Yep. Like those mechanics, tactile mechanics, are really interesting to me. So I think that if there was a game that I was developing, I'd want to look into those. That would be my thing. I don't mean custom dice. Custom dice. Now, I'm being a little hypocritical coming down on custom dice. I'm the kind of guy that when I play a board game that I really like, I will buy accessories for that board game to make it feel like a more premium experience. Things like inserts for the box so that when you put it away, it's put away in a really fancy way that's then easy to pull the game out afterwards. Sleeves for the cards that go in so that they shuffle nicely and the cards don't get damaged as you play. Tokens that are made of different materials like acrylic or metal so that they feel more substantial in the hand. All of that is like lovely for me when I play games. I adore that. It has to be a game that I actually love to play because I don't want to invest $200 in a game that I'll play once for 2 hours and never again, unless those are the best 2 hours that I've ever played. But I kind of rankle sometimes against custom dice. And the main reason why custom dice kind of annoy me sometimes is that it feels like instead of it being a true, this is going to make your game better, this is going to be a way that we force you to buy our stuff so that we can add on to the investment required for you to get into this game. And I understand the necessity of those kinds of things. Look, profit margins are not great on these sorts of things, and it takes a lot of money to put out a professional product. Being able to get a hold of the art, like commissioning the artists, layout designers, editors, writers, playtesters, developers, community management. It's all a huge undertaking. And that undertaking isn't always an easy thing for small independent companies to do. But it also isn't easy for large companies to do either. If you're not like a Wizards of the Coast or a Paizo, you've got your work cut out for you. So you offer additional stuff to go with your game because that's the way you can help get people involved and get people paying more. And it's kind of difficult on the player side sometimes for that. Because if you want me to pay for extra dice, those dice better make that game feel awesome. They better make me feel great about playing in them. And if they don't, well, then I'm a little more annoyed. So, and the thing is that the mechanics, they'll often include like, oh no, it's okay. You can still play using normal polyhedral dice that you have at home. You just have to consult this chart to see what the results are. But I don't want to have to consult a chart every time I roll dice. And you've made your system so that I have to consult that chart. And it's not worth it. So, blah. Hi, Kaiser Omnic. Oh, it's been a little while. It's good to see you. Kaiser Omnic says, I see several games now that use tarot decks to add complications to their games, and even some where your hand influences what powers your character can have by discarding the right card. Similar to Deadlands and their poker hands. Yeah, tarot decks are an interesting way to go along those lines as well. And understanding that if those mechanics truly make the game better, I'm all for it. I'm so in. If those mechanics feel like they're tacked on in order to make me buy a tarot deck, but it doesn't actually improve my experience, then I'm not. Here's a way to look at it. Here's an example. Guitar Hero and Rock Band were games that were incredibly popular for a long time. And the reason why they were popular, they were quite expensive because you had to buy the video game, but then you also had to buy plastic instruments to go with them. But it felt good to play with those plastic instruments. Technically, you could just play with a controller. You could have just pushed the buttons. You could have memorized the sequence. But the point of the game was the controller. The controller was what made that game fun. In and among the other things that are in there. But like the primary draw was you get to feel like you are playing an instrument, and playing the instrument had a different feel to it than sitting there with a controller in your hands. Totally understand, Kaiser Obnick. Totally understand. And those games succeeded because of their peripherals, not in spite of them. Because the peripherals were fun to play. They were great fun to use. And that's fantastic. But then there are video games out there where they're like, well, you could get this extra controller, but often that doesn't make the game better to play. I'll use a personal example. I can't say that this is, objective and definitive, but Mario Kart for the Wii, and also recently Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, would have a steering wheel that you would slot either the Wii remote or your Joy-Con into, and you would hold the steering wheel like this, and then you would turn it like this. But those were gimmicky. It was not a better way to play the game. It felt like you had less control. There's no real feedback, so it wasn't like using a steering wheel for a racing game, because it was just something that you were holding off into the thing, and you were just kind of doing this. So you weren't also like doing full rotations of a wheel like you would in a real car. You were just going. Meanwhile, everyone you were playing against was probably just using the normal buttons, so they had a huge advantage on you in that case. In which case, those peripherals did not add to the experience. They were offered, but they were optional. But that option didn't make the game better. If they had said, you must use the motion controls for these games, that is the only way to play, those games would have been worse for it, because those motion controls were not more fun to use than the standard controls. So that's my kind of analysis when it comes to like custom dice. If your custom dice actually make the mechanics more interesting and more fun, if it makes me more engaged with the game and I'm like, yes, this is amazing, all for custom dice. It's great. If it feels like your custom dice just make the game more complicated, or that they make the game, that they're sort of focused on shifting the game around, but they're not really more fun than if I was just using other dice, not interested. It is part of the thing that I knock against when it comes to Genesis and the Fantasy Flight Star Wars. I don't feel like their mechanics are so interesting in terms of like the advantage and threat and success and failure. I don't feel like those are interesting enough to justify it. Funnily enough, the 5th edition of Legend of the Five Rings, which uses custom dice, those are a little more interesting to me, because instead of it being this weird nebulous advantage, threat, success, failure, it's actually stress that you have to worry about that come up on the dice. So at any rate, Felipe, you sold your Ion Drum Rocker Pro Rock Band drum kit. Yeah. Playing the drums was one of the most fun for me on Rock Band, because it was actually a pretty good analog to playing an electric drum kit or an electronic drum kit. I studied percussion for 2 years when I was in school, so I wouldn't necessarily call myself a drummer. It's also been a very long time since I've done it, but I did it enough to sort of know what it felt like to play on a drum set. And when I was playing in Rock Band and the drums, it was great, because also they were often the guitar, you weren't actually fingering all the correct chords, but for drumming, you were actually drumming to the beat. So, boom. I really did enjoy that, and the Ion pack just made it feel so much better. Oh, yeah. But DDR mats, Low. I'll say this, Beat Saber is a great replacement for DDR for me in some ways, because I enjoy like physical based rhythm games. And at the very least, I'm not going to piss off all my neighbors. There was a time where I wanted to build my own like arcade quality DDR mats, to basically use that not just to play DDR and emulators, but also, as an excuse to stay fit. But I can't do that because I live in a condominium building. And I really don't want to piss off my downstairs neighbors. Because I get the feeling like hearing them stomp on those things and jump up and down would just destroy them. But the thing about DDR mats is that if you didn't invest in them, if you got like the cheapest, like really crappy ones, at the level that I was able to play at, those mats were useless. They would just shift around way too much. And I didn't get the tactile feedback that I needed. I was also stomping on hard floor, so it was rough on my feet and legs. Like, they were useless. You actually had to invest in nicer mats if you wanted to get anywhere. And honestly, what you really needed if you wanted to play at the level that I was at, you needed like arcade style pads. So, yeah, there is a guitar game that needs an actual guitar. So that is Rocksmith, and they are still releasing Rocksmith, and they're still releasing the accessories that go and plug into an actual guitar. And it purports to help you learn how to play guitar or bass. I just haven't looked into it. I know that Kate at one point was looking into those. That's cool, Luke, that you had somebody who had a song on Rock Band as DLC. That's like super cool. Tarot being too edgy, Kung Fu Fenris, I can see that. There are some people who put a lot of stock into tarot, so hopefully I'm avoiding offending anybody by saying it this way, but there are people out there who have genuine belief in such things as tarot readings. And so there are some who would say that to trivialize tarot cards, to make them part of a game, would be the equivalent of taking like religious symbols and throwing them into game. And so some people, that's totally fine. And for some people, it's not. So I can see, but if it's in a Vampire the Masquerade game, I can see like, I can see that's a little bit more like, come on, like you're already doing this, aren't you? Fudge. So Fate is custom dice. They're just plus and minus, but they're also D6s. And like you can, a D6, it's a lot easier to remember, 1 and 2 are minus, 3 and 4 are neutral, 5 and 6 are plus. So you don't have to buy the dice, but you can still get away with it. In that case, like the mechanics are a little different. I'm just not a huge fan of the Fate system myself. I think it's a good system for some. I don't think it's a bad system, but it's not a system that I've enjoyed personally. We played Rocksmith a fair bit. It's great, and the training games are fantastic too. So, Craig, if I can ask, can I, somebody who has no experience playing guitar at all, could I pick up that game? See you later, Luke. Could I pick up that game and a guitar and learn to play guitar with no actual teacher, just the game itself? Aspects, Kung Fu Fenris? No, I just don't. I think that Fate is too rules light for me to be interested in it, to put it bluntly. And I think that there are better rules light systems out there for running things like one-shots or whatever that are more flavorful. Fate runs into the same issue that I find a lot of games that are like, you can run this for anything, runs into, where I'm like, this feels generic, and it sort of passes on the buck of game design to marry it with narrative design. It's the same issue that I have with Genesis. At least Genesis and Fate have like modules that you can kind of apply to them, but I prefer the rules to be tied more intimately with the setting and narrative and theme of the game. Yeah. I call it rules like Kung Fu Fenris because of its, I guess you're right. I shouldn't say that they're rules light. They're rules generic, and generic isn't something that I find terribly fascinating these days. When I look at Fate, I see if again, using video games as an example, I see like, okay, well, here's a platformer, and I have to provide the graphics, the music, the backgrounds, the end goal, the enemies, all of it. All you've given me is the physics engine. And I can't change the physics engine the way that I would want. And that's the problem. For some people, it's great. They'll be able to make a game, and they'll be able to make a game that they're proud of and put it forward, and that'll be fantastic. For me, it doesn't let me tweak where I want to tweak, and it doesn't do enough to encourage the melding of narrative and other things. So that's kind of an issue for me. Now, admittedly, and I'm going to be very clear about this, I haven't spent a ton of time with it. So don't take my review of it as like, well, Fate sucks and I'm not going to play it anymore. But generic rule systems are ones that I also struggle with, because as in my professional life, basically my entire job is make a game fun, make a narrative fun, make the game and the narrative work together. Not make a narrative and hope it fits with the game, or make a game and hope that we can tack a narrative onto it afterwards. The best games meld the two. So Craig God, absolutely, it starts on very easy levels, sneakily increases the difficulty. So if you're constantly getting 100% on a certain chorus of a certain song, it'll add a few extra notes until you're gradually onto the medium level. Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe one day I'll actually try to pick it up and learn how to play the guitar. And then I'll just, instead of role playing, I'll just come on here and say like, anyway, here's Wonderwall. And I will live the meme dream, a meme that I'll be several years way too late. Mechanics must enhance theme, ideally, or vice versa. On sub, low. It can work either way. Mechanics can enhance the theme, but also themes can sometimes enhance the mechanics. Some games you play because of the story. That's the main driver for the game. Walking simulators do this. Things like What Remains of Edith Finch, Gone Home, games like that. Like, it's really sort of, it's less about like the mechanics of the game. To the Moon, as an example. So sometimes you want to enhance that story. The mechanics are there to serve the story. But sometimes you're actually there to play with the mechanics. The mechanics are great. Mario games are like this. Mario games are about pure expression of platforming skill, and it's a lot of fun. But they wouldn't be nearly as fun if they didn't have a world attached to them, and that world is narrative. Otherwise, it's literally this pixel moves along and jumps on that pixel, and when it gets to the end, it goes on to the next level. But the fact that Mario jumps on a Goomba to rescue a princess being held in captive by Bowser is narrative. And then in later Mario games, that narrative, even though they're very story light, the narrative presence in that world is quite heavy. Super Mario Odyssey has a ton of narrative in it. You can see posters for Bowser and Peach's wedding all over the place in the various different worlds. Each world has its own feel, its own population. Like, there's a ton of that. But that is in service of the mechanics, which is Mario running around collecting moons, which is the main reason you play that game. So it goes. I heard some dude in Riga playing Wonderwall and I almost died from generic. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the life that we lead. And then you have games like Tetris, which is pure mechanics Requiem, but Requiem, I'll point out the Tetris Effect says it takes a game that is basically pure mechanics and then adds an aesthetic to it. It makes it a synesthetic experience with music and sound effects and visual effects, and even the rumble of the controller in your hands. The fact that you can play Tetris Effect in VR and have it be an immersive atmosphere, it's still Tetris, albeit Tetris with one small mechanic added to it, the zone mechanic. But that is an example of taking the aesthetics to a game that relies entirely on its mechanics and enjoying it. I also can tell you that Tetris wouldn't have exploded the way that it did past, like, look, it was a brilliant game when it first came out, but there's a reason why each version of Tetris that comes out now, they pay attention to things like graphics, visual effects, when you clear lines on all that. It makes a difference to players. Kaiser Omnic brings up another very good point. The creators of Dear Esther said they wanted as few mechanical interactions as possible because mechanics broke immersion. And for that, they were very specifically saying, let's do this game this way. But there's plenty of mechanics that are involved. It's just not mechanics that the player is interacting with on a conscious level. It's, in fact, it's more like we developed this game and the mechanics of this game exist to create a level of immersion where then the player enters into a flow state where they are part of the game and are ignoring the mechanics for the rest of the game. They're not actively thinking about playing. They're thinking about interacting with the story and experiencing the story as opposed to playing a game. So that's all fascinating stuff to me. And in some ways, that's something that we look at when it comes to tabletop role-playing games. Do we want to have a game experience that involves a lot of game, where you're looking at your character sheet, you're playing out the tactics in your head, you're picking up dice and rolling them. You have that XCOM feeling of, I have a 99% chance this is going to hit, and then that 1% happens and you lose 3 teammates and you're crying and sad. But there are also some games where people are trying to achieve flow. Flow in video games is something that I think I'll probably bring up on a future clinic hours, because we're kind of reaching that 5-minute mark here and we're wrapping up. But flow is that feeling that you are no longer consciously playing the game. You are now in a state where you can continue to play without thinking about it. Tetris is one of those games that is so popular because you enter into a flow state where it just becomes make a line, set up your tower, get a 4 in a row, get that Tetris, make a line. And for gaming, if you get into a situation where you're no longer picking up dice and you're role-playing and you're not noticing that you are deliberately shifting the story, but so is everyone else around you, you enter into a flow state. And some of those flow states are the moments that you remember in gaming the most. But there are also moments where you remember picking up that D20 and you roll it and it lands on that perfect natural 20, the only way that you were ever going to make this incredible hit. And that's a moment that you'll also remember. So you have the ability to have both. The question is what kind of game you want to play and what kind of experience you want to have. I got to thank everybody for tuning in. It's been a fun clinic hours. It was great to have a look over at the Avatar Legends Quickstart for people who are interested in that. You can find it on Kickstarter. Just do a search for Avatar Legends. You'll find it. Otherwise, tomorrow, Punchy, I believe that they're still playing Punch Effect, which will be over on twitch.tv/Elizabeth A. Neal. Not sure what's happening on Saturday. These days, I'm not sure, but I can tell you on Sunday, over here at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we will be playing episode 5 of season 2 of Exalted Academy. Hope that we get a chance to see you there. Also, big thanks to Real Brick Wall for being in here, lurking perhaps, but moderator extraordinaire. And for everybody who had questions to ask, comments to make, or even if you were just lurking and hanging out and listening, it's great to have you. And that's a lot of fun. Join our Discord. Discord's cool. Discord's a great place to discuss gaming and all other things, and it's also a good place to find out what kind of projects we might have coming up, and hopefully we'll be able to start talking about this soon. At any rate, I can tell you that it is sometimes hard, but inevitably one of the easiest ways to resolve any problem you're having in a role-playing game is to use your word hole. We'll see you next time.